Selamat pagi Pak Dekan. Pagi Ibu WD1, WD2.
Selamat pagi Pak Wermat.
Selamat pagi Pak Dekan. Ibu Nina, WD1. Apakah suara saya kedengaran?
Kedengaran, Prof. Kedengaran.
Oke, baik Ibu WD2.
Saya Pak Wermat.
Sehat, sehat. Sehat Ibu.
Izin ya, Prof. Kita mulai jam 9 ya, Prof.
Oke, siap, siap. Jam 9 berarti ya?
Iya, siap.
Oke, masih ada 15 menit. Saya bisa sarapan dulu.
Izin, Prof. Ini peserta kita yang mendaftar 2.000 orang lebih.
Yep, wih, banyak sekali.
Karena ini memang mahasiswa-mahasiswa yang ikut MKDK Psikologi Pendidikan.
Psikologi pendidikan ya. Oke, saya izin apa mati kamera dulu sebentar ya
Siap,
Ibu
siap,
Nina ya.
siap, Prof. Adik-adik semuanya diharapkan selama kuliah umum kameranya di-on kan ya. Iya.
In the legendary landscape of the largest crater lake in the world thrives a glorious civilization. In North Sumatra, people live colorful lives. And nature continues to fascinate both the locals and visitors from all walks of life. A delightful escape with a sense of adventure. In the hidden paradise of Sumatra, experience the awesome nature. Understand the connection to ancient cultures, like dancing for ancestors, a colorful tradition, joyful yet also potent, mystifying rituals, proud people of the mountains. At the coast and in the cities. Remarkable diversity. A bustling city. A multicultural Mecca. Peaceful harmony. Incredible culinary. This is North Sumatra, the land, also the people. Genuine warmth. Wonderful Indonesia.
Sebentar, sebentar. Pak Dekan, izin Pak Dekan, bisa kita mulai acaranya Pak Dekan?
Iya, dengar terus saya, ya kan?
Oh,
Udah,
iya, dengar
silakan.
Pak. Iya, kita mulai ya Pak ya acaranya Pak ya.
Ya, silakan.
Izin Pak WR4, kita mulai acaranya Pak WR4.
Oh,
Masih di mute
silakan.
Pak ya. Oke, baik. Terima kasih Pak Dekan. Silakan panitia.
Hello everyone, we're about to begin the general lecture. Ladies and gentlemen, please turn on your camera and make sure your microphone is on. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I hope everyone is doing good today. Welcome to General Lecture, Teachers' Roles on Achieving an Inclusive Education. This event is part of the project-based learning in the educational psychology subject, and this general lecture is organized by the MKDK team from the Faculty of Education, Universitas Negeri Medan. In cooperation with two senior lecturers from notable university, Dr. Katherine Smith from the University of Melbourne, Australia, and Professor Samila Roslan from University Putra, Malaysia. Everyone, it is such an honor for me to be here. Before I introduce myself, let me thank you to the committees who had worked to make this event possible, and also to all the participants who have joined us this morning. My name is Puan Audia Zahra. I am a second-year student of Early Childhood Education Program, Faculty of Education, Universitas Negeri Medan. Honorable, the Vice Rector of Planning, Cooperation, and Public Relations, Universitas Negeri Medan, Professor Dr. Elon Elda Manik. Honorable, the Dean Faculty of Education, Universitas Negeri Medan, Dr. Zainuddin M. MSE. Honorable, Vice Dean of Academic Affairs, Faculty of Education, Dr. Nani Barora Nasution. Honorable, Vice Dean of Administration and Financial Affairs, Dr. Zuraida Lubis. Honorable Vice Dean of Student Affairs, Mem Kamtini STD MPD. Honorable, our invited keynote speakers from the University of Melbourne, Australia, Dr. Katherine Smith and Professor Samila Roslan from University Putra, Malaysia. And also all the lecturers of Mata Kuliah Kependidikan MKDK Psikologi Pendidikan, my fellow college students, and our blessed participants today. First of all, let us all say thanks to Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala who has been giving us His mercy and blessing till we can gather here in this right place with healthy condition. Secondly, let us send our salawat and salam to our beloved Prophet Nabi Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Ladies and gentlemen, we have several agendas for this occasion. First one is opening. Second, praying. Third, listening to National Anthem Indonesia Raya. Fourth, speech by our beloved Dean and opening remarks from Vice Rector of Planning, Cooperation, and Public Relations. Fifth, a photo session. Sixth, our main event, general lecture, and followed by Q&A session. And the last one, but not least, is closing. All right, ladies and gentlemen, before we enter to the next occasion, let's pray together with our beliefs and religion. Praying start. Pray finish. Okay, next we are going to move to the third agenda. Let us listen to the National Anthem Indonesia Raya. Everyone, please remain silent and sit with perfect manner. Hey, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to listen to speech from Dean of Faculty of Education, Dr. Zainuddin. To Dr. Zainuddin, time and screen is yours.
Thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good
Waalaikumsalam
morning.
warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, sir.
First of all, I invite all of us to express our gratitude to the presence of Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala, who has been giving us some mercies and blessing so that we can attend and gather at this virtual meeting. Your Excellency Vice Rector for Planning, Collaboration and PR Affair, Bapak Profesor Dr. Aaron Litno Damanik, MSI, Honorable all Deputy Dean in Faculty of Education, Dr. Nani Barara as Deputy for Academic, today's event marks a significant step forward in our journey toward educational excellence, as we have the privilege of hosting two distinguished speakers from universities recognized in QS 100 rankings. Their expertise promise so have light on the intricate relationship between psychology and education, guiding us toward innovative approaches in teaching and learning. To our esteemed speaker, Professor Samila Roslan and Dr. Katherine Smith, I really hope that you will share your knowledge and experience generously, inspiring our students to think critically and creatively about the intersection of psychology and education, especially inclusive education. Participants in this general lecture are all students from class 2023 who are taking educational psychology courses under coordinator Professor Wildan Salubis. This lecture is not just another academic gathering. It is a significant step toward realizing the vision outlined by Ministry of Education, Culture, Research and Technology as we strive for the transformation of higher education. Even like this, serve as catalyst for change, inspiring innovation and excellence in teaching and learning. I encourage each and every one of you, dear students, maybe 2,000 students participate in this meeting room now, to seize this opportunity to enrich your knowledge and broaden your horizon. Let this moment be more than just a lecture. Let it be a transformative experience that deepens your understanding and enriches your academic journey. Before I conclude, I would like to express my heartfelt gratitude to all those who have contributed to the realization of this event. Your support and dedication have been instrumental in making this general lecture possible. Without wasting time, I invite our respected Vice Rector to deliver opening remark and officially open this general lecture. His guidance and direction will inspire us all. Thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you. What a pleasant speech. Thank you so much, Sir. Now I am inviting Professor Dr. Eran Damanik to open and share his opening remarks of this event. The Professor Dr. Damanik, time and screen is yours.
Okay, thank you. Puan, was my voice is heard?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah. For the first time and first all, we apologize because Rector is not present here because Rector have done another agenda, especially for have a meeting about visitation for Faculty of Medicine, a new faculty in Universitas Negeri Medan. Yeah, our distinguished guests, excellencies, Katherine from Melbourne University, also Samila Roslan from University Putra, Malaysia. The board is speaker in general lecture in this morning. Welcome to the Universitas Negeri Medan through this virtual meeting. Also, Dean of Faculty of Education, Bapak Jainuddin, also Vice of Dean, Ibu Nani Barona, Ibu Khadijah, and also Ibu Kamtini, all of lecture in Faculty of Education. And more specifically, we are proud from all participants, including students in Faculty of Education, Universitas Negeri Medan. Basically, the principle of Universitas Negeri Medan, Rector and all of vice of Rector, fully supported for every program. Yeah, for every program have the objective to improve the quality of learning, including learning outcome in Universitas Negeri Medan. By this program, general lecture, it is the channel, one of channel, how to improve the quality of education, including the learning outcome. Many channels like a seminar, like conference, like focus group discussion, including general lecture. General lecture is the way how to improve the student by the recently information, in this program. Faculty of Education invite two speakers from a reputable university, Melbourne in Australia, and also University Putra in Malaysia. I hope this program is genuinely to improve the quality of student and also the lecture in Faculty of Education, Universitas Negeri Medan. Finally, with our permission, the teacher role in achieving inclusive education public lecture with the main theme of with our permission, the teacher role in achieving inclusive education, general lecture in the Faculty of Education, which was officially declared open. And I say thank you very much and congratulations for Faculty of Education, and thank you.
Thank you, Prof.
Ya, silakan Puan.
Okay, thank you so much, Professor. That was a very insightful speech. Now we are arriving in the fifth session. We invite all the participants to turn on your camera and give your best smile. The committee will take the screenshot now from page 1, page 2, and page 3. Okay, done. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the time that we've been waiting for. We are going to enter the main event, general lecture, Teachers' Roles on Achieving an Inclusive Education from the first keynote speaker, Dr. Katherine Smith from the University of Melbourne, Australia. That will be moderated by my colleague, Nikade Suwardika. The Miss Kade, time and screen is yours.
Thank you, Puan. But before that, untuk Bapak WR4, if you have another activities, you can left the room. Thank you so much for your attending. And thank you, Pak. All
Yep.
right. Thank
Terima
you,
kasih
sir.
Pak WR4.
Ya, makasih Bapak dan
Terima kasih
Ibu.
banyak, Pak.
Terima kasih Pak WR4.
Yeah, for Katherine and Romla. So
Thank you.
I am permitted from this
Makasih,
living to host this conference.
Thank
and
you.
I'm
Thank
sleeping.
you.
Okay, thank you very much and
Makasih.
Thank
congratulations.
you.
Thank you. All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Nikade Sardani. You can call me Kade, a third-year student from Department of Guidance and Counseling, Faculty of Education, Universitas Negeri Medan. As the host has been said, that I'm going to be moderating the first lecture that will be delivered by Dr. Katherine Smith from the University of Melbourne, Australia. Before I invite her to the screen, let me read her CV to you all. All right. Dr. Katherine is a senior lecturer of Wellbeing Science and currently the Director of Student Experience at the Melbourne Graduate School of Education, the University of Melbourne, Australia. Her research focuses on care ethic and social justice in the nexus of evidence-informed policy and practice, and concentrates particularly on equity and well-being in the use of digital and robotic technologies. All right, without further ado, let me invite Dr. Katherine to the screen.
Thank you very much. It's lovely to be here.
Hi, Dr. Katherine. How are you? Selamat pagi, ya. How are you?
Oh, I'm very well, thank you. I'm just trying
Great.
to share my screen.
Yes,
Can you
sure.
see my slides?
Not yet.
Not
Oh,
yet. Okay, let's see what's happening.
all right.
Okay, now, one moment.
It's okay. Take your time.
Now you can see them.
Yes, it's
Yeah.
already on the screen. All
Oh.
right. Are you ready to share your expertise on inclusive education to our audience?
I sure am. I'm looking very much forward to it.
Yes. All right. Please, time and screen is yours, Dr. Katherine.
Thank you very much and welcome everybody. It's lovely to see you today. I'm here in a much colder climate, I think, today, although we did get to see the Borealis, the Australia the lights that were in the skies over the last couple of days because of the solar flares, which was pretty magical. I'm here today to talk to you a bit about the research that I've been doing in thinking about inclusion in Australian schools. I started working in this area a long time ago as a teacher. I worked even when I was a undergraduate student in working with adults with additional requirements that is to assist them in living and working and learning. And over time, I have done a lot of research with teachers around what helps them to be as inclusive as possible in the classroom. But during the COVID pandemic, we were very much locked down here in Australia. We had over 200 days of lockdown in Victoria. And one of the areas of research that was really important to us at the time was seeing how young people with disability who were in schools fared during that time. And so this was even before I finished my PhD. You can see I'm still a Ms. in the title. We did some research with young people's families and an organization called Children and Young People with Disability Australia, who put out surveys every year and have done so for about the last 8 to 10 years. And most of them are responded to by young people with disabilities, parents or carers. Over time, most of them have been responded to in that way, which means that we're getting a little bit of a different voice and a different read on what we understand of young people's experiences. But importantly, we have over time worked with young people to think a bit about how we develop this research to capture their voices more specifically. And in doing that, we can see that what parents and young people tell us is often quite different. What parents tell us is sometimes quite different to what young people tell us. And so we think it's really important now to continue to capture the voices of young people. And one of the things I'll advocate for in this lecture is thinking about not just how we do this in big research projects, but how we do that in our individual classrooms and how we make sure that we're not deciding how we meet the needs of young people who have disability or neurodiversity or have additional requirements that help them to learn alongside their peers. We need to kind of ask them what works for them and what doesn't. So in Australia, our current policy environment has a bit of conflict in it. We have been advocating for many years for full inclusion, which means that we would have all kids go to school in the same classrooms. We wouldn't have specialist schools or specialist settings for inclusive for kids with disability or other behavioral, cognitive, intellectual issues. What we would do is follow the guidances of the conventions that we've signed for the people with disability and actually create inclusive classrooms where everybody could access everything in the same room. In 2005, and then when we rewrote it in 2015, we have what we call the Disability Standards for Education. And this is a document, it's law, and it tells us what our responsibilities are as educators and as people in schools and governments to meet the rights of young people with disability and what we have the responsibility to provide. In Australia, we have really important protections for young people. And we also have a great deal of data that we're starting to develop around people's experiences. It's a bit tricky the way that funding works for young people with disability. In fact, for all people in schools with disability. And I'll talk a little bit more about that as we go. But just so that you understand, there are two ways that funding is given to people with disability, and they're separate. They're managed by different parts of the government. And this is tricky for the people that actually receive the funding, because even though the government departments see themselves separately, it's one person with the same needs, and they don't always separate between what I need at school and what I need at home. Sometimes they overlap. But we have very separate systems for funding disability in schools and funding disability at home. And so that often creates challenges where what funding should pay for what when kids are in school a lot of the day. So what we know is that kids here have the right to be admitted to the school that they apply to, that they should be able to take part in a course or program, and they should have an opportunity to take part in all their learning experiences, and that they should be provided with support to make these adjustments so that they can do that. The most important thing that's promised in the disability supports for education is that students should have a right to participate in a way that is the same or very similar to their peers. So these are all the framings of the things that we're thinking about in terms of inclusion in education in Australia. Now, I mentioned data, and data is a really important part of what it is we're trying to do, but also the advocacy that we're trying to do to move forward to a space where we can have full inclusion in mainstream classrooms. And these are not small challenges. These are really big challenges. There's no easy fix for this. And it has to happen over time and in particular ways. And as you'll find out as I kind of explain some of the research we've done, it is really challenging because right now, some mainstream schools do not feel or create safe environments for kids with disability. And so specialist schools are often a choice that kids and families make because they just don't feel like they can make it work in a mainstream school. But what that means overall is they don't have access to a lot of the resources and opportunities that a mainstream school provides. And when we talk to young people post-school, when they've graduated, we hear pretty consistently that if they had their choices back, they would have tried to make it work in a mainstream school. But we know there are lots of barriers in the way for them to do that. And so lots of young people end up in specialist settings where they don't get the full experience of having peers with all sorts of different abilities. So we have what we call the Nationally Consistent Collection of Data for School Students with Disabilities. It's the NCCD, and every school has to fill this out, and it goes to a central data bank. It's only a few years old, and it started right as COVID happened. So there was really disrupted numbers, and we still can't use this data with any sort of real robustness yet. There's not enough years to do some comparisons and findings. But what it does is it gives us an idea of what kind of planning, teaching and learning, curriculum assessment, and extracurricular activities and different ways that schools have been adjusted for kids with disability. And when I say disability, I don't just mean physical disability. I mean all things that might hinder the way that kids learn in a school. And so schools are given funding through the application of this data to help them meet the needs of all students. But the principals are the ones that make the decision about how that works. So some principals will use this funding to bring in specialists like occupational therapists and speech therapists, and others will hire a new teacher, and others will hire classroom assistants that follow different kids around during the day. There's no one set approach, and principals have full autonomy to make those decisions. So what that means is that kids have very different experiences from schools to schools. Now, when we talked to people in the COVID-19 lockdown, and this was early in the lockdown, we wanted to check with kids and families what was happening for them when the schools closed down. And one of the things that we found quite extensively in this research in 2020 was that some of these families really got forgotten. If there were individual education plans, which are individual plans for meeting the needs of students in the classroom, most of them were forgotten and were not returned to adapt the learning in the online setting. For those who had additional issues, some just did not go to school, even though online school was being provided for various reasons. And most importantly, most families felt like if anything was going to be adjusted so that their child could access the curriculum, it had to be done by the families, many of whom were also trying to work online and manage other kids' education as well at the same time. So out of the 719 people that we spoke to in this survey, there were only 5% of young people who were responding, and the rest were 95% family members. So in the free text, we got a lot of information about family experiences, but not very much about young people's. We knew that 80% felt that the responsibility of education shifted from teachers to parents, and many parents had to do a lot of work to translate the learning materials. Now, this was interesting. In other studies in Australia, what we found was that parents realized that a lot of the work that was being done in schools wasn't ever meeting the needs of the young people, and that kids often, if their parents had the time to spend with them to do this work, actually did better in the time they were at home with their parents learning than they had in terms of progress in the academics at school. And this was an important finding for us because what it meant was our partnerships between families and schools and those individual education plans weren't working. They weren't kind of making it so that those kids were really flourishing at school. And so it really gave us the idea that we had to do more research and we had to find out what was happening that kids weren't learning at school, even when they had individual learning plans and they had aids and they had all of the things that should be working. Why weren't they included? So we looked at kind of the individual education plans in particular. And while 70%, now 100% should have had IEPs, but 70% did have IEPs, but only 9% of them had those IEPs looked at during the pandemic, during any of the lockdown time. And so that means that those aren't really important documents. They're not living documents. They're certainly not something we turn to day as teachers. And when I talk to teachers about this anecdotally, especially my students in the Masters of Education program, they feel that these documents are more an accountability measure than they are useful for teaching. And that's a really tricky thing to hear because it's the only thing that is really kind of there as a contract to meet the needs of these kids in mainstream classrooms. So until we get those right, until they become something more meaningful and more useful, this isn't going to really change a lot in for these kids. So in talking with young people who form the Youth Advisory Network for Children and Young People with Disability Australia, we talked about the fact we weren't getting enough young people's voices. So we did some co-design research with young people around transitions from school. We did a few more projects. And finally, we designed a survey that we wanted just young people to answer. So it went out online. We had a small response. We had 231 respondents. I think we don't have the right reach yet. And so we need to think a bit more about where we can find young people. But as you are all probably aware, those of you that have done any research, It can be tricky to launch research into different social media networks if you're also part of a university, because there are all sorts of ethical guidelines around whether or not you can use things like TikTok or other bits and pieces, where I know we could find young people if we were able to use them. So the other thing that meant was that we had 78% from 3 of the states in Australia. So we don't have an equal spread. So we have to take this with, some recognition that there are some limitations to the data. We launched the survey on the 24th of October, 2022, and we left it open quite long until the 23rd of January, 2023. But most of our responses were received during November 2022, when we made a big push on Instagram. We were really careful with this survey. The reason why it took so long to design was that we made sure it was in accessible English language. We provided Auslan interpretation, so that's sign language, and those videos were embedded into the survey digitally, and everything was captioned as well. So we took a universal design approach to making sure that the survey was accessible as possible. And then we did the same thing with the findings. We wanted to make sure that young people could access all of the findings from their contributions to this. So we also put out all of the responses in easy English, with Auslan interpreted and captioned videos as well. Now, what the previous literature told us before we looked at this survey was that young people and children with disability fare less well than their peers in education. Kids with disability are segregated, but they're also suspended and expelled from school at high levels in Australia. Often, when we talk to young people about this experience, the level of frustration at not being able to access material often leads to outbursts of anger or violence, which are part of this process. Not in all cases, but certainly in some of them. In the last 15 years, the level of educational attainment for people with disability has really improved. So we are kind of seeing some gains, but it's still lower than children without disability. And this has real lifelong implications for the agency that young people feel as they grow into adulthood around their lives and their opportunities. And so we see that kids with disability are more likely to experience poverty, less likely to be in work, more likely to be socially isolated, and more likely to end up in trouble with the law in some cases. So in this survey, we found it really interesting. As I said, we put it into easy access for young people. So we gave them the opportunity to give 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 stars for their school around different levels. So 1 is a very low rating and 5 is the top rating, everything is good. So what you see here is the ratings for how they felt in terms of being welcome at school. And so the majority of the responses are in the lower end of the scale, although there were some, almost just a little over 20% of students who thought that school was quite welcoming and inclusive. Now, all of these kids were going to different schools. So what we did find was that those that found school was inclusive were equally placed in both specialist settings and in mainstream settings. So there were some kids who experienced both settings as welcome and inclusive. We asked them then about the ratings of support for their learning and experiences at schools, and we see things start to tip into the middle here. And some of it is happening and some of it isn't. The third one was interesting for us. And this is one of those situations where sometimes having young people read through your results with you as co-designers and co-researchers can be really important. We thought, oh, this is great. students and young people are finding that the schools have high expectations of the students and their learning. But what's important to know here is that the students are not necessarily feeling that high expectations means something positive. In this case, they actually felt that high expectations in this language equaled pressure for them. So in talking to young people, while we saw this as a positive thing, for a lot of young people, they felt that this indicated that they had more pressure than they could handle. So we thought that was interesting and something we would need to change in the language in the next survey, which is about to launch now. What we did find was that they felt that their teachers and their staffs and their support staff were very undertrained. And this was the theme that came through the whole of the survey. In looking at the actual data and bringing in the voices of the young people that actually participated in this, what we find is that 70% of the young people felt excluded from activities. We heard from kids that they couldn't go to camps or excursions unless their mom was there. And while that might be fun when you're a primary school children, that is very awful for a lot of teenage kids to have their mom come along to these things. They want to be as independent as everybody else. There were all sorts of things that schools were doing to kind of reward kids for good behavior. But even if the kids won those rewards, they weren't included in things like trips to the beach and jumping castles. So there was a real disconnect for them in terms of the ways that the other students were experiencing school, and they were. This student is nonverbal, and the teachers hadn't been trained very well to understand the ways in which they could express themselves. We have some really interesting research into young people who experience this. And currently, Tim Chan, who is a young person who's currently doing his PhD at Monash University, has been an advocate, even though he's nonverbal for a long time, and he needs to speak with his computer. And he describes his experiences in schools in really challenging ways that are really important for us as teachers to understand that when young people come in and they have certain technology that's allowed them to speak, and they are suddenly not able to use that technology for whatever reason, whether the funding is gone or whether that doesn't necessarily sync with the programs at school, or it's not meeting the cyber security principles of the school, that can be an enormous loss for somebody who has a voice and then suddenly doesn't have one in any of their classes and is unable to kind of express the level of learning. So these were important things for us to note. We also know that so many friendships are formed in out-of-class activities, music classes or PE classes, or, school camps or excursions. But because there's no wheelchair accessible buses, most young kids were having to, again, take a separate car or taxi or have their mom drive them whenever they went anywhere. So they missed out on all the social activities that happened on buses and in different transport. Often with PE or physical education or gym classes, there was nothing planned for them. So they just sat and watched while other kids played and did other activities in a way that was pretty isolating. And when these things happen, both the kids that are doing the activities and the kids that are sitting on the bench, they see each other in those categories, and that creates an additional social tension between the two groups. This student said, I was mostly excluded, but it was never, you can't sit with us. Nobody was really mean to them. They just never ever talked to them. Something was there that kind of, stood in the way of them being able to communicate and connect with their peers, or for their peers to see them as someone who they could be friends with. In research that I recently did with the Down syndrome Victoria, we found this to be the case, not just for kids, but for families as well. Young people with Down syndrome almost never got invited to birthday parties or activities or dances or anything that kind of happened that was social around school. That meant that the parents weren't there either. So there were huge gaps in their ability to kind of make connections with the school and with other parents. And that social isolation is a really key element to understanding what the risks are if we don't get young people's voices as part of the processes we have in inclusive education. These kids all told us that they had real needs for adjustments that did not happen and they did not know where to go to for help. So this student here is a deaf person, and they use different technologies to have things translated for them. In Victorian schools, we're not allowed to have telephones, and no exception was made for this student. So everywhere else that he went, he was getting translated kind of materials, speech to text, but he could not do that in his classroom because of that rule. So it's often the case that we need to think about those adjustments in more open terms, because there was a really easy opportunity for the student to have that support, but because of a general rule that they wouldn't kind of bend, he was left without any understanding of a lot of the learning materials that were happening in the classroom. This student here says, they often have real panic attacks. This student is on the autism spectrum, and they have panic attacks or even kind of meltdowns with even headphones and fidget devices. And that often happens in things like assemblies and lots of children activities. And they find that that's okay. Like, they don't think there's any way to adapt those activities to suit them. But what they do need for people to understand is that so much of the information and things that happen are expressed in those spaces and nowhere else. So they often find themselves not knowing lots of things. And so while they don't necessarily have to be at these events, these things need to be recorded or transcribed or something, so that all the information that happens is shared with everybody, even the people who can't access those events. And some young people just found that in their mainstream classroom, even though they could not access the material, the curriculum, or the playground or the library, there was no support for them at all. And that was particularly young people who did not have family who was able to advocate on their behalf. Now, I got to give a trigger warning here, because this is pretty hard to read. And I've included some, but not all, of the very difficult things that young people told us. Bullying is really common for young people with disability, and we know this from global studies. We know that young people with disability and people in the LGBTIQ community are more likely to be bullied than any other groups in our schools. And in this case, it was no different. And when we asked young people to tell us some of the experiences we had, one of the things that really surprised us was how many times teachers were part of the bullying. They felt that they had been bullied by teachers, which was a big concern for us, because in the power dynamics of a school, and given our recent Royal Commission into institutional violence for young people with disability, we know that it's very hard for young people to get help if the people that are hurting them are people who have a lot of power over them. But it wasn't just parents, it wasn't just teachers, it was also kids, both verbal but also physical. And we followed up, obviously, but this young person had even kind of gotten to the point where they were having quite violent events. Their laptop was smashed and their arm was broken. And we see this as a real huge issue for us to tackle. Now, I'm going to go theoretical for a second because this kind of leads into the work I think we need to do as teachers. And one of the things that I've found doing this research is really important to think about when I work with teachers, both in practice teachers and initial teacher education teachers who are learning to be teachers. And so this framework is one that I use in all of my work, and it looks at things we need to think about in terms of the relationships where we have to care for someone. And I think in teaching, we have to care for all of our students in one way or another. But care is a really tricky word. It can mean kind of something that we feel, but it also holds a lot of the things we do. And in caring for students, we have both moral and cultural obligations, and we also have our practice and the things that we are contractually obligated to do, so the things that we're paid to do as teachers. And often when our students have additional needs, or we have connected in some way emotionally with the needs of that student, our moral responses and our emotional responses are more driving in our work than our actual contractual obligations. So we see that where people feel like they really need to help someone, they will put more energy into their teaching practice with those people that they feel like need that help. And often that's to the point where they don't even realize that they might not be seeing other things that are happening in the room. So in a lot of my research, I've taped people teaching, and then I've watched those recordings with those teachers and talked a bit about what they see and what they don't see in their relationships with students. And often there are surprises for all of us as we kind of think we're doing one thing, but we're often kind of missing some other things that are happening in the classroom. So this work to me was really important to think about when we started talking about the work with students and with my students who were teaching. I wanted to get these voices in the research to the teachers, but I also wanted to think about ways that we could instill some practices and some policies that would allow for a better opportunity for these voices. What's important to recognize is a lot of the decisions that we make in our classrooms happen really quickly. And it's those ones that I'm particularly interested in because we have thought actions, but we also have dispositional actions. And those actions are the ones that come immediately in response. And sometimes there are hidden biases about and for some students. Sometimes we have students that we particularly feel close to, or we understand. And sometimes we have students, this is important to admit to yourself, that we are really not working well with and that we struggle. And sometimes we feel a bit happy when they don't show up because their behavior is really challenging or they're very disruptive. And these are the things we need to work on in order to make sure that we're being equitable in our practices with teachers. And we can only do that by having ways that we check in with students around what's working for them and what isn't. So in talking to the students, what they told us they wanted teachers to know was that all teachers need to have training on disability, neurodiversity, medical issues, and mental illnesses from people who are disabled themselves. They wanted the teachers to understand what they often find is that that people are taught by people who have no idea about what they're talking about. They've not experienced it themselves. So what they want is for their teachers to be taught by people that have experienced this. What I've found is that in working with young people with disability and people with disability in this research, there are better questions asked in interviews. There are better questions asked in surveys. And it's often important to have those views on the results that we get, because sometimes we will not see what the meaning is in the way that someone with a lived experience is. So I think that this recommendation by young people is particularly important. And if we are going to meet our obligations in terms of integrated learning and inclusion, then we need to kind of think about what we do to capture these voices, not just generally in surveys and interviews, but in each of our classrooms around what's happening, what could happen, and what might assist in doing that. What we did hear from a lot of other kids, particularly in response to the bullying, was that they really needed help making friendships, that there was a real barrier in kids seeing them as potential friends. It wasn't just on their side. Other kids just didn't see them as people that they should invite to their parties or, play with in the playground or choose as a partner, because all of the fun things that those kids were doing were things that they weren't really included in. So even though they were included in terms of going into the classroom, there was big steps that still needed to be made in terms of social inclusion. So what we do think is important is that we directly address bullying and other issues by enhancing social skills for all students, for promoting emotional and education for students and for staff. We know that teaching things like social emotional learning doesn't just have an impact on students, that we see great benefits in well-being for staff as well, partially because their relationships become better, I think, in the classroom, but also because they have less conflict within their classroom and more time to spend on more positive academic oriented activities when students have ways of meeting with conflict, but also when students have ways of making friends and belonging and building empathy. When it comes to improving those interpersonal relationships, we have an obligation to do that as part of inclusive education. And without those sort of supports for all kids, with and without a disability, we're going to continue to see, I think, some of these challenges around social inclusion that could be overcome if we could demystify and segregate some of these practices that create exclusion for students in some situations. So where next? I think that there are some really clear ways that we could work, but the main one that I kind of wanted to talk to you guys about today and welcome any questions about is the opportunity to think about how we develop individual education plans from early childhood, and how we, as kids develop, help them learn how to advocate and understand how to meet their needs so that they have opportunities for lifelong learning as well. We're seeing massive changes for some people, but most of those people are people who have additional resources. We see great outcomes for kids whose families have money, but we see an ever-growing divide for kids whose families don't. And that is exacerbated when kids also are experiencing disability, or their parents as well have a disability. So I welcome any questions about any of this. There are kind of additional areas of research that I'm moving into. We followed 12 families. This is a separate project with disability during the pandemic, and we've just followed up with them again to see what's changed, in particular around individual education plans. And even though there was a big push for individual education plans within the government departments based on the first research that I showed you, there wasn't an uptake in teacher kind of satisfaction around those processes. teachers found them as a really onerous exercise that was really difficult, and that they just didn't have the time or kind of capacity within the classroom to manage individual education plans for all the kids with disability they had in the class. So they became onerous exercises that were done out of hours rather than meaningful documents that actually captured the opportunity to listen to and work with all the other people that were supporting that young person to meet their goals and meet their needs in order to achieve those. So the other thing I'm working on is this is another project that we did around teacher voice. And as I said with the videos, I think that we often see things in our practice when we're watching ourselves teaching that we don't recognize that we do until we see that in practice. Bourdieu, from whom I'm drawing the concept of dispositions, talks about how we often have to explore those dispositions because they're hidden inside. They're part of our habitus, and they only kind of inform our practice in quite unconscious ways. But that we can use things like metaphor and image to help people expose those things. And a lot of my work has been around that when I work with teachers. And I'd like to continue the IEP work in this vein, thinking about how teachers might use them in meaningful ways. And we can use some of the data sets like the NCCD and other things that I've used to make this an easy but meaningful process. And I welcome any comments that anybody has on that. So that's the end of this for me. Anyone can email me. I love talking to people about research, and I love hearing other people's ideas, especially if they don't agree with me, because that's always a bit of fun too. And I tweet and do various things on the internet underneath the handle of Educate for Equity. So you can also reach out for me there. That's all for me. I'll stop my sharing now and see if there are any questions.
All right, what a great lecture, Dr. Katherine. That was amazing. And I also a bit sad by seeing the data that you put on your slide. I mean, the things that the student with disability have been through, it's
a lot.
It's too sad, yeah. I mean, also from the difficulties came from the teachers itself, their peers, and also the curriculum. I mean, yeah, I think as a prospective counselor and educator, I could see how important the teacher's role is in realizing the inclusive educational community. So that was amazing. Thank you for giving that great lecture for us. Okay, Dr. Katherine, in this room, there are a lot of people. There are a lot of audience have been really exciting for your lecture. I mean, more than 700 audience already joined with us. I also open for the class Q&A session for those of you who have a question for Dr. Katherine related to the topic that already shared to you guys. You can raise your hand or you can put your question on the comment section below. You may ask with bahasa, then I can help you to translate it. Do you guys have any question to ask? But I think in the meantime, I actually have one question for you, Dr. Katherine. As you said, as you mentioned before, that students with disability have the right to join in all parts of education. They have the same right? They have like same right as students without disability. And you also mentioned about individual education before. Then, in what ways does individual education support the practice of inclusivity both in school and community in general?
Yeah. It's an interesting one. And I think technology plays a big role in some of the individualized education that we're talking about. One of the things that we know around kind of young people and their socialization in classrooms is that collaborative learning activities and that whole class sort of work is really important for bonding and all of the things that happen. We hear other people talk, we have a chance to kind of express our own feelings, and those things are really important for everybody to be involved in. If we're not careful, even when we have what looks like an inclusive classroom, there's a couple of ways that kids can get segregated out. One is through their classroom aide. If they're sitting with a teacher assistant or a classroom aide, and they're doing different work than everybody else, and they're doing that while everybody else is talking and doing the same thing, that's another form of segregation. They're not really in the class, they're just physically in that space. The other thing that happens as we get better and better with technology is that these kids are kind of set up on computers to do individualized learning. And again, you know, they might be meeting certain academic goals, but school is about more than just academic goals. It's about being the whole person. And all of these sorts of separate activities and barriers and boundaries that we put up between the kid and the rest of the peers creates additional exclusion. And we have to be careful with that. That being said, there's lots of really great work that can be done with technology. It's just really important that it's a tool that we use while we teach, not the tool that teaches instead of us.
I agree. Wow. Okay, then, oh, we already have question here. Okay, Dea Audina Siregar, are you here? Okay, can you unmute your audio? Hi, Dea Audina. Okay, you can ask your question, please.
Okay. First of all, my name is Dea Audina Siregar. Nice to meet you, ma'am.
Nice to meet you too.
I want to ask, in your experience and research, what are the most effective strategies for creating an inclusive classroom environment that supports the diverse needs of all students?
Yeah, there's a few things that I think are really important. The first one is that when we are creating things that are helping one student to access the curriculum, whether it's using captions when we're talking, or whether it's you know, using visuals as well as just our kind of teaching talk, that we not just give those adjustments to one kid, we apply them for everybody. In my classroom at the university, I have a lot of second language speakers. And even though I originally started using captions for a student with a hearing impairment, it's actually been my second language students that use that transcript a lot more. It's a universal design for learning principle that I think is really important. If we're going to do the work of adapting, we should apply it for everybody, because lots of people find they didn't know that they could benefit from, you know, using those things. I always put written instructions on the table as well as on the screen, because I know that some people have auditory and processing disorders that make it really hard to read on the screen and follow instructions. All of those little things often help people I didn't expect them to help. And so I think those sorts of universal design principles are really important. But also, I think that we need to work explicitly on relationship skills. And in my kind of now 30 years of teaching, there's been a real shift in the amount of time kids spend in computer spaces and in digital spaces, and they have different communication skills. And they perhaps, as early childhood, don't spend as much time watching grown-ups and people talk to each other because they're more on screens. And so they don't necessarily learn the same skills around social emotional communication that they would have learned in the past. And so we need to do some explicit learning around that. And the more that we can do that in fun ways, in ways where kids actually talk to each other and practice those skills, the more that we can see people build empathy and understanding for different people's experiences. So I think social emotional learning, and not just like packaged resilience programs, but real opportunities to think about key issues and to really work together to kind of come up with solutions and critical thinking are really important things that we need to kind of help kids to learn together. And that's where I think real inclusion starts, when we can let our kids who are otherwise considered different be experts in their own lives and be seen to be strong in their opinions and the ways in which they can approach problems that other people may not have thought of. Did I answer your question, Dea? Dea Audrina?
Great answer. So Dea Audrina, how about the answer? Is that clearly answer your question? Still mute? You can unmute your.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you for your answer.
Okay.
All
I'm
right, Dr. Katherine, we have another question. I think this is for the last question from Thessalonica. I will read it for you. So he asks, how can teachers foster a sense of belonging and acceptance among all students? All right.
I think this is an important question, and it's not one that just teachers can do. It can often feel when we're working in a classroom like we are the person that has to solve all the problems, but we can't. We only have students for 200 plus days of the 365 there are in the year. So the way we work with students has to, at developmentally appropriate ages, help them to learn how to help themselves. That means really helping have active conversations and teach them how to problem solve and to help seek in places outside of school as well as in school, and to think a bit about where they are connected and to help them understand where they could be connected through sports or through mosque or through church or wherever it is that they find community outside of school, and for them to use those skills that they're developing in school to make sure those connections and protections are there for them throughout their lives, not just during their school years.
All right. Okay, that was great because you mentioned that this is not only teacher task, but all of us can support the inclusivity life, because nowadays, like, not only like school but also community can support the inclusivity. So you said before that they can find community and also support them be expert in their own life, right?
Yeah,
Great.
I think one of the things that's really important to recognize is that people don't know that they have a disability unless the environment makes them feel like they can't do something. And it is often a social construction. If we build environments and teach in a way that everybody can access, then we don't have those barriers in place. We have to think a bit about how we build spaces and places and learning and services in ways that are accessible for everybody. And then it doesn't really happen.
All right. What a fruitful discussion, but we also have the last audience I want to ask you, Benedictus Bram. Okay, are you here? Hi, Benedictus Bram. You can unmute yourself.
Hi, Kak.
Okay.
Hello, am I
You
audible?
you can ask your question, but before that, you can introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Benedictus Bram. First of all, I would like to thanks to Ma'am Catherine and Kak Kadek for giving me the opportunity to ask you this question. So, people who have disabilities sometimes feel like they're left out, and sometimes they got bullied. Do you have any strategies can teachers do to prevent the discrimination and bullying towards towards the people who has disabilities? Thank you.
Yeah, that's not an easy one. I wish it was. But I do think that teaching people to have friendships is really important. The other thing that we need to be teaching is how to be a good bystander. Bullying doesn't happen in a silo. People see it, people do it, and we need to denormalize that kind of behavior. One of the things I think is really important is to build those friendships and those understandings, and to create educational goals that include social outcomes. But we need to teach kids without disability how to be inclusive of kids with disability, and break down some of those stereotypes. Every time we decide not to include those kids in one of the activities that we do, we're saying those kids are different. And while we keep doing that, of course, there's going to be barriers. So the most important thing I think we can do is make sure that they're included in everything we do and not just some of the time. And that we do really kind of concentrated efforts around friendship building early in education and continue to foster those relationships throughout.
All right. Benedictus, how is that thoroughly answer your question?
Well, that's actually really cool. Thank you,
All
ma'am.
right. Thank you. Okay. Okay, that was a great discussion. Thank you, Dr. Katherine. But sadly, we're in the end of session for our first lecture with Dr. Katherine. But before that, I will invite our committee to share the certificate of appreciation, to share the certificate of appreciation to the screen for Dr. Katherine from our faculty.
Thank you.
All right. Alhamdulillah. All right, please kindly receive that. And once again, thank you so much for your involvement to our event, Dr. Katherine.
Thank you very much.
That was Miss Nina voice.
Even dances. I love it.
You like it, Tess?
It's great.
Okay. Glad that you like it.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Dr. Katherine. That was a great lecture for today. It was eye-opening and give us new perspective and new insight for us as like prospective educator. And yeah, this is the end of session. You can leave, or if you have another activities. Thank you so much for your involvement or event once again. All right. Good. Thank you. Have a great day. All right. Since the first lecture is already done, I return this screen to Puan. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Kadek, for moderating our first session today. Now, we will move to the second speaker, Professor Samila Roslan from University Putra Malaysia. The session would be moderated by Yolenta. Yolenta, time and screen is yours.
Okay, thank you, Puan. Hi, everyone. I am Yolenta, a first-year student from the Department of Guidance and Counseling, Faculty of Education, Universitas Negeri Medan. As the host has been said before, that I am going to moderating the second lecture, that will be delivered by Professor Samila Roslan from the University Putra Malaysia, Malaysia. And before I invite her to the screen, let me read her CV to y'all. Okay, Professor Samila is an expert in applied psychology specializing in application of psychosocial profiling in creating efficient and productive educational, social, and work environments. Her work involves identifying factors, developing structural psychosocial profile models for various groups, and suggesting the best intervention, program, or blueprint towards enhancement of learners' potentials, successful group dynamics, and congruent work environment. Okay, all right, without further explanation, let me invite Professor Roslan to the screen. Hi, Professor Roslan, how are you?
Thank you, Yoleta.
Yes, yes.
Fine, yes.
Okay, Professor Roslan, are you ready to share your expertise on inclusive education to our audience?
Yes, definitely. It's my pleasure.
Okay, thank you so much. And please, time and screen is yours.
Thank you. Can you hear me clearly?
Okay, okay.
Yeah. Okay. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. And good day, everyone. Thank you for inviting me to this wonderful event. I'm so happy to see so many students here. It's one of the biggest events I have ever attended, managed by students. So congratulations to all of you. This is really wonderful. Maybe I can share some of the activities, the programs, the experiences that we have done at University Putra Malaysia, and hopefully I can also learn. I've learned so much from Dr. Katherine Smith's speech just now, and I hope to learn more from all of you. So we at University Putra Malaysia, we have a faculty that is named as the Faculty of Educational Studies. And in this faculty, I'm working there as a professor in educational psychology. So part of the activities that we have done at the faculty involves championing some programs for students who have special educational needs. So in the way we describe and understand an inclusive education, it is education that includes everyone. You know, no one should be left behind, and because we are including and recognizing and appreciating everyone, we have to ensure that the approaches that we are proposing adapt and recognize the various different needs. So this includes students who are having special educational needs, like students with learning disabilities, students with physical disabilities, students who have certain challenges because of their background, and also students who are gifted. We are also including gifted and talented students in our approach because we believe that we should have platforms for students to practice the skill of living in a whole community. So the reality outside of the school or outside of the university is that we live in a community that has various differences and diverse backgrounds and special needs. So all of us have to practice the skills of how to do this. Okay. Give me just 2 minutes. Okay, sorry. So to understand the inclusion, to us, it goes beyond physical presence. It's about embracing and accepting the diversity and creating a sense of belonging for every student. It means that we appreciate the role that is played by each and every unit of the team. Yeah. So if we are in a team, everyone, regardless of their backgrounds, disabilities, differences, they all have special and unique roles to play. And what we need to learn is how to complement each other's strength and work together and have a fun time. So in our experience, we believe that teachers, educators are very, very important in playing the key role to promote inclusion through the approaches that they use, and also through the expectations, the way they deal with the students, the way they show the values that they hold, and so on and so forth. In our program, so we have multiple approaches, but one of the interesting program that we have been doing since 2013 is called it's a special program. Yeah, so this program is targeted at creating, developing, and producing a conducive environment for every child. We believe that this is essential to ensure that their potentials are tapped and nurtured to the most optimum level. You can see here that some of the activities that we have done, these are the activities that we have done, is being featured in local newspapers because we want the community and society outside of the university to understand and to learn on the value of empowering people with disabilities. We believe that this universal principle must be applied to all educators, all people involved in education, because most of the time our inability to really identify and nurture these children with special needs in terms of their talents, their gifts, their potentials, this issue stems not from our ignorance of the principle of equity in education, but rather from our inept knowledge and skills of the extent to which these children are capable of doing. So the key word is empowerment. Studies have shown that setting high expectations and benchmark for these children with special needs and believing in their capability to not just achieve for themselves, but also contribute to others in the society can have significant positive impact on their self-esteem and their social skills. However, we do not seem to have enough opportunities where children with special needs and members of the community, be them school students from the mainstream classes or just the public at large, can really experience doing things together. So we saw that there's always a form of segregation. We know we've been talking about inclusion, but for some reason, the children with special needs have always been like at one place and the mainstream children at another. So we are trying to find ways for the community to practice empowering children with special needs with tasks and roles to play in the society. So we also involve our students at University Putra Malaysia. At UPM, we set a lab called the Fusion Lab that serves as a platform for students and community volunteers to be part of the therapy while also learning on how to create groups and teams that consist of students and people with special needs. So we have had, so it's not just students from the Faculty of Education at UPM. We have had students from the Faculty of Engineering, Faculty of Sciences, who are interested to learn on how they can best work with, socialize with, children with special needs. So we created platforms for them to be able to work together and learn on how to move beyond just feeling sympathetic or empathetic to accepting and treating each other as unique members of a community. So this form of role play helps everyone to practice adjusting and adapting in order to complement each other's strengths while empowering everyone. So through these activities, UPM students are able to acquire the skills to include people with special needs in their team and understand that they too can play significant roles in the community when empowered accordingly. Through Fusion Lab, we practice on combining creative arts and neuroscience and nurture a very strong symbiotic interdependence, trusting relationship between the special children, the children with special needs, and the community at large. So Fusion Lab is supported by researchers from multidisciplinary background ourselves, involving educational psychology, music therapy, agriculture, and food culinary sciences to explore and study the potentials of various approaches such as community therapy, music therapy, agricultural therapy, and cooking therapy in helping students with special needs acquire a better connection with the people around them, as well as help our student volunteers to develop a better understanding on how to engage and empower members of the community who have special needs. So in this picture, you can see our sort of icon for the Fusion Lab members, because this project started in 2013 with music therapy in collaboration with Professor Yoshihito Shirai's family. So Professor Shirai is from Kyushu Institute of Technology, and QTech or Kyushu Institute of Technology has a collaboration with UPM. It's actually based on biotechnology, but the interesting thing is that Professor Shirai has a gifted daughter who, despite having Down syndrome, can play marimba to perfection. So her name is Sayuri. You can see her here. She performs together with professional marimba players in Japan. So once I found out about this, myself, several students and myself, we went to Japan to learn from the team there. Yeah, they are called Twinkle Cats, and we learn how they actually work on this idea of the community embracing the uniqueness and the strengths and the talents of the children with special needs at Fukuoka, and planning a lot of activities together. So Sayuri is so special. She plays marimba to perfection. You know, I have several videos, but maybe there's not enough time to play to you. So what we did was we tried to expand by including our students here. So these are some of our students wearing the traditional costume for Kuda Kepang and DK Barat. I think you all in Indonesia are also familiar with these two things. So we actually did a lot of programs in UPM and also in several states, where we actually had showcased just to the public, of course, some excellent marimba marimba play by Sayuri, and also the theater performance, dance performance, DK Barat performance that is performed together by University Putra Malaysia students and the children with special needs who are in our team. And we actually receive a lot of queries from people who wants to learn more about this. So we actually focus more on these two traditional and cultural activities, which is DK Barat and Kuda Kepang, supported by our student volunteers. So you can see here many student volunteers coming in. These are all our student volunteers, and we perform together with the students, with the students with special needs. So why DK Barat and Kuda Kepang? I think you all might know Kuda Kepang in Indonesia. So Kuda Kepang involves some props. Yeah. So when we created these props, these horses, of course, make them very, very nice. The students got very excited. So especially students who have social issues students with ASD, autism spectrum disorder. Initially, the parents bring them together with us, and we just dance together using this Kuliah Kepang dance. Of course, the music is very addictive, and it invited the children to come and join with us. So we give them the props and they dance together. So that's the first start, just to declare that we're together as a community. And we found that the students start to communicate and talk to the students, UPM students. They call them abang and kakak, like brothers, sisters. So they actually start to communicate, start to socialize, start to discuss, just simple, normal things initially. But then it expands to other things that involves, for example, the issues that they are facing, how the kakak and abang, the brothers and sisters UPM students can actually assist them by giving them the support, encouragement, and so on and so forth. So Kuliah Kepang is one very popular activity. And then we have DK Barat. I don't know if you all are familiar with DK Barat. It's a form of song that's performed by singers who sits in a row like this, and they will do some hand movement related to the singing like this, so there's some hand movements. The hand movements must be memorized, and it's also very interesting because it kind of invite you to come and do the same movements together. So this is the first picture. Here is our students in green in Japan, in Fukuoka, Japan. So we went to Fukuoka, Japan, and we performed with Twinkle Cats. So you can see they have students and people with special needs here together with volunteers. The white ones are the ones from a school who actually volunteer. I think, if I'm not mistaken, they're professional choir singers or professional dancers. I cannot remember, but they came in and we perform a lot of things together on a stage in a big auditorium that housed more than 1,000 people. So it was very fun. It actually created that feeling of belongingness. We are together as a team. Nobody is different. Is an inclusion in our the way we see it. So down here you can see the Kuliah Kepang movement. So these are our students, the one in yellow. These are our students. These are our members. So all these pictures I'm sharing, we have obtained the permission from the family and the students to share it with the public because we want to educate the masses on what we are doing. So some of these members, they initially have socialization challenges, but once they are in the team, after several months, they have become very well at socializing, at communicating, and the parents are very happy to see this positive development. So again, we invited the newspaper. So this is a form of collaboration that I feel educators should understand and should leverage on. It's good to have friends who are reporters, who are influencers, so that they can help disseminate this knowledge. We need this understanding of how inclusion is important to be spread out to as many people as possible in the society. So one of the best ways to do this is by getting influencers or reporters to help spread these wonderful things that is happening. So these are some of the activities. Again, you can see because of the colorful attire and the fun songs and the movements, everyone seems to enjoy themselves. So it is a form of therapy and it's a form of learning process, not just for the children with special needs, but also for our students, for the volunteers that joined us from the community, because they learn more about, so most of the volunteers are UPM students from different faculties, but I also brought in our masters in educational psychology students, and they are able to learn more about how we can actually champion this idea and implement it in many different platforms. So after many fun sessions, we have seen students who initially do not socialize becoming more open and making friends, yeah, with the volunteers. We even see children who are gifted, who have so many gifted and talented students, especially those with very, very high IQs, also have some emotional issues because of their asynchronous development. The cognitive develops very rapidly as compared to the psychomotor and the socio-emotional development. So they are in constant frustration. They also have extremely high expectations of themselves and others. So with these students, when they are together with us in Fusion Lab, they became, they learned from the children with special needs, or with ADHD, autism, dyslexia. They learned on how to be more accepting of how things are, you know, and that actually helps them a lot in addressing their frustration and their emotional issues. So happy are everyone with these activities that we are able to do annual performance every year since 2013 in Malaysia and Japan. We only stopped in 2020 because of the pandemic, 2020 and 2021, but we picked up in 2022 doing the activities and had another performance in 2023. Yeah, so this was something that many UPM students look forward to, and also the members of the Fusion Lab team are also very excited about. So our programs are graced by honorable and esteemed figures like this. This is the Queen of Malaysia, Permaisuri Agong, Yang Teramat Mulia Raja Permaisuri Agong, yeah, the Queen of Malaysia. We had the Japan ambassador here joining our program. This is a special entrepreneurial activity by children with autism. Some of them non-verbal, but they are able to open a cafe and actually generate income and be self-sustainable. So these are some of the things that we try to show to people that you know, we just need to work together and empower them, believe in their capabilities, and they are able to achieve a lot of wonders. Yeah. We also extended our community therapy. So we call that community therapy because we got all the communities to be involved. We extended that to agricultural and cooking therapy, involving volunteers from UPM and also from the surrounding neighborhood called Sri Serdang. So this is our lab. Our Faculty of Educational Studies have cooking labs. We have a lot of labs for teachers. This is for teachers in home sciences. So we actually use these labs and we do all these activities with them. The cooking therapy received great feedback as the children excitedly learned how to set up table and come up with simple but nourishing food like sandwiches and scrambled eggs together with the students of UPM. The agriculture therapy gives a sense of empowerment as the children observe the plant that they actually planted, brought to life from mere seeds. They were taught right from the beginning, UPM being actually we are an agriculture university. So we explain in detail on the medium, how to prepare the medium, how to plant the seeds, how frequent they need to water them, and so on and so forth. So the students actually got to experience this whole process of being responsible for the plants together with the help of the volunteers and UPM students. We also do friendship training. This is a more focused, specialized program. We conducted series of friendship trainings for high functioning children with autism. This is based on a special module that involves the participants learning new social skills. And we have some practical, some social practical sessions with other participants, and the students also receive coaching on their play dates for each 1 hour, 30-minute session. Okay. They were also given homework assignments to increase social practical hours at home. And the assignments were guided and monitored by their parents and evaluated by the researcher on the next session. Overall, the effect of getting the exposure to do activities with university volunteers has been positive on children with special needs joining the activities at Fusion Lab. More of such opportunities can actually be provided to these children, especially through the various activities planned and executed by university students as part of their extracurricular activities. So this is the statistics that we've run for this is for the friendship training class involving 30 students. And we got significant improvement in social skills after the program. So can you imagine the kind of impact that university students can do, educators can do, if all of us encourage the educators, student teachers to embark on special community programs involving children with special needs and their families. Not only are we able to assist some gifted and talented children to realize their potentials and contribute to the society in their own unique ways, we might also be opening doors to wonderful opportunities and heartwarming stories of friendship and sharing of social responsibilities. So this is the community intervention that we did just recently in 2023, end of 2023. I hope I can play this video, and it's a short video that shows what happened throughout the whole of our 8 weeks program.
Saat malam dan cahaya pagi menyapa dirimu, ukir senyuman manis di pipimu.
So it was very fun for everyone. I think, sorry. The next slide. Okay. So based on what we have done so far, I think there are several takeaways that we would like to share. The first thing is that it's important for us to create an inclusive classroom culture, because teachers, the educators, they are the key players in fostering an environment where inclusivity is actually practiced and thrives. This involves creating a space where diversity in learning and cultural backgrounds they are respected and celebrated. It's important to adopt diverse teaching methodologies so that we can use differentiated instruction, we can use individualized education plan. But I totally believe that we have to continue putting people together in one place, doing things together. It was mentioned just now about the role of technology. Yes, there are so many current technologies that we can actually use for the benefits of the children with special needs, translating text into speech for children with dyslexia or visual impairment, or translating sign languages into spoken words into sign languages. So these are some of the artificial intelligences that we can actually utilize. And of course, UDL, Universal Design for Learning, is very, very important. It is actually planning the learning environment with everyone's needs and interests in mind. So we try to have situations where everyone can feel that they belong there. You know, it's like not just a class for children in the mainstream, not just a class for children with autism, not just a class for children with dyslexia, but a class that actually acknowledges and welcome everyone's presence. So it is something that is, I believe, not difficult if we have a team of people who understand the philosophy of UDL. You know, so we work together, we brainstorm, we troubleshoot. It's a continuous process. We troubleshoot as we go on, find ways to improve and make things better. Another important thing is to get the community engagement, especially the parents, the schools, the community. So educators should find ways to work together, especially with families and parents. So that I was part of this Families and Schools Together program. So the whole idea is to make school and families as a team. Yeah, in Malaysia, sometimes the schools and the families are like two different teams, and they don't really work together. So the whole idea is to have family as part of the team, trying to help and educate all students, and also involve the community. So the thing with our Fusion Lab is we always get volunteers from the surrounding communities, and by having them together, it brings a lot of strength, it brings a lot of happiness to the whole team, seeing that we have people from various backgrounds contributing. Okay. Another thing is it's important to cultivate the culture of acceptance. So and for me, values like this has to be embraced by educators before we try to instill it into others. You know, so values is something that is contagious. You have to have the value, and other people will actually absorb it from you. So we first and foremost have to embrace the understanding that you know, everyone is special, everyone is unique, but we need everyone to complement each other and make this world a better place. Yeah. So no one should be left behind. The more inclusive you are, the stronger you will be. That's to me, that's a philosophy that we have. So by having and encouraging and embracing diversity in whatever programs we are doing, we are actually championing the principle of inclusivity, and hopefully it will be continued by other people who share the same belief. Also, educators need to continue to advocate for equity. This means that we have to sometimes go out of the school and out of the classroom, out of the university, talk to people who are in policy making, the policy makers, people who have special fundings, you know, talk to them and let them be aware of the importance of providing equity for everyone, regardless of race, gender, socioeconomic status, disability. So in my experience, those people in the ministries, they have too many things on their plate. Sometimes that if you don't go to them and highlight this to them, they could easily, you know, not thought about it, you know, because you know it's out of the things that they are doing so many things. But once you show to them and you highlight to them, they will definitely support your cause and be together with you. So many of our Vision Lab activities receive funding from people outside of the university, from the state department, state education department, from even the state itself, state governance itself. We also receive funding from Kyushu prefecture. So they actually helped fund some of the activities because we include some student mobility programs. We need to also provide responsive learning environment. So a responsive learning environment means that, you know, whenever students are in that environment, they feel that their physical needs are taken care of, their social needs are taken care of, their emotional needs are taken care of. The environment is responsive to their social needs, emotional needs, physical needs. That means that, you know, if the environment needs to be improvised in such a way so that people who have wheelchair can easily move around. If the environment needs to be prepared in such a way so that people who feel that they need social or emotional support can feel supported, because there are players or there are elements in the environment that support that. We have to work on that, you know, have it installed in the environment so that it becomes a very responsive learning environment. And of course, professional development and training is very important. So this program today is a wonderful example of the kind of training and exposure that everyone needs. Everyone, even if you are a professor, you need to continuously be exposed to this training and learning experiences, because there's always a lot of things that we can get and innovate, and you know, get some ideas on how to innovate and make things better and come up with solutions to any challenges and issues that we face in the course of our championing in inclusive education. And it's good to continuously measure whatever impact and progress we are doing, because we have to keep reporting to people who we want to get their buy-in, want to include in the future. So they want to see some impact, some testimonials of what people who have gone through our activities say, yeah, about what we do. So lastly, I believe that empowering educators is very important. So in Malaysia, I always tell my teachers, student teachers, as well as my ex-students who are now holding posts in government ministries, to not pressure teachers with clerical activities and workloads. We should actually empower educators to utilize the knowledge, the skills, their natural instincts as educators to provide the best learning environment for the students, which should include fostering inclusive education. So let the teachers take charge of, the learning process in schools, and just support them so that they can make profound impact on the lives of our students. So that's all from me. If there's any questions, maybe I can address them.
Okay, what a lecture. Thank you so much, Professor Roslan. And what we can learn from this lecture is that to realize that an inclusive education, teachers could do community intervention, universal designs for learning, and responsive learning environments to fulfill students with disabilities as a support for their development. Most importantly, teachers should always be eager to develop their professionalism. And I found it very interesting to see that you actually did a lot of projects and activities for children in special needs, and it shows how educators play a key role in promoting inclusion through their teaching practice and classroom environment or their programs. And projects and activities you did is such as Dikit Barat, Kuda Kepang, and also community therapy. And in terms of doing the community therapy, I want to ask you something. Do you involve the parents or students only?
Yes, we definitely involve the parents. So there are some sessions where we put the parents in one place so that the parents can talk to our researchers, and we have the volunteers with the students together in one place. Sometimes we just have to separate them because especially in the beginning, because many children with special needs, they do not want to participate in the activities if they see their parents. They just want to run to their parent. So in the beginning of the activities, we have the parents separated, but towards the end, the parents will be more involved in many of the activities once the students are already comfortable being with our members of Fusion Web.
Oh, okay, that's amazing. And thank you so much for your contribution, Professor. And as a prospective counselor and educator, I could see how important the teacher's role is in realizing the inclusive educational community. And all right, we will open for the Q&A session. If you have anything to ask related to the issue of inclusive education, teacher's role, or something like that, please raise your hand and unmute your microphone. You may ask in Bahasa Indonesia if you like, and I will help translate it to English. Thank you.
I do understand Indonesian language, I think.
Oh, you do. Okay. Okay. There's one question from Yolan Margaret Simbolon. Please unmute your microphone and introduce yourself first.
Okay, thank you for the time and opportunity. First of all, let me introduce myself. Hi, ma'am. My name is Yolan Simbolon. And my question is, in your experience, Have there been any major obstacles or challenges during your time in inclusive schools and how you overcame them?
Okay, thank you. Of course, there will always be challenges, especially when you work with children with special needs, you know. There are times when they will have tantrums, you know. So we will have in our, before we run the program, there will be special training for the volunteers involved, because some of the volunteers, they are not trained in education or in special education. So we tell them about triggers, you know, what are the things that can trigger tantrum among children. If you are working with children with OCD, for example, and they are doing all these activities, you saw all these activities, you must let them finish. There was a case when one of the the usual volunteer couldn't make it, so there was a replacement. The replacement wanted to, you know, because the student was very slow, so everyone has finished. So the volunteer says, okay, let's wrap up. Let me help you, and that actually triggered a huge tantrum because. And they couldn't handle it. So I just quickly come and then I said, okay, let's do it. Let's finish it together. I'll stay with you. Don't worry. And immediately the boy stopped crying. So there are things like this, but this is a good lesson for everyone. Sometimes if you just listen from PowerPoint presentation by your lecturer, OCD have to do like this, you know, the amount and the level of learning that you gain is very small compared to you experiencing it themselves, you know. So now you know what you do if you have an OCD person in your team, like in the workplace later on. I always tell them, we have to always remember that this happens not just in school, working with people with special needs, but also outside there in the workplace. That's what we want to do. We want to have more people with special needs in the workplace so that, you know, it's an inclusive environment. So if you have people who have OCD in the workplace, we have to understand their challenges, and they also, once they work with us, more or less understand how people without OCD do things, you know. So the understanding is what we want to actually continuously instill in everyone.
Okay, thank you so much for your answer, Professor. How about you, Alan? Is that answer your question or what?
Okay, I can understand. Thank you for your response, ma'am.
My pleasure.
Okay, and I think there's one more question from our MC, Puan Audia.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity, Joanne. Hello, Prof. My name is Puan Audia Zahra. I want to ask a question related to the material that you explained before, that how can we develop and choose appropriate development programs for disabled children? Like, for example, the one that you mentioned previously about agricultural therapy. That was my question.
Very good question. Very good question. So actually these materials take some time to develop, you know. So I told you initially we learned from Japan, Crinkle Cat. So we did a lot of visit there. We communicated with them. We even brought some expert from Japan to Malaysia to teach our special education teachers on how to come up with the materials. Yeah, so it involves a lot of training, and then you of course you improvise based on your classroom, your students, you know, the kind of materials you have. You can improvise later, but initially you have to go through the trainings to get some idea what kind of activities you can do, what are the do's and the don'ts, and so on and so forth. So still I can say that the first 2 or 3 years of Fusion Lab is more on learning, a lot of learning part for the Malaysian team. And we learn mostly from Japan. Then we start developing our own, and then we start improvising according to, you know, the unique needs of the teachers and the students.
Okay, thank you so much for your answer, Professor. And how is that one? Is that answer your question?
Okay, thank you so much, Prof. That was very Didn't know
You're
that.
most welcome. You're most welcome.
Thank you.
Okay, Professor, I think that was the very last question from today's session for us because the time is limit. And okay, what a fruitful discussion from our professor and our team. Now I will invite our committee to share the certificate of appreciation to screen for Professor Samila Roslan from our faculty. Okay, please kindly receive that. And once again, thank you so much for your involvement to our event, Professor.
My pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Can I leave?
Thank you.
Okay, you can unmute your microphone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, guys, since the final lecture is already done, I return the screen to Puan.
Lucu tahu.
All right. Thank you, Yolanda, for moderating our final session today. Ladies and gentlemen, now it is the end of today's event. We would like to say thank you so much to all the participants who joined us today, and also special thanks to our speaker, Dr. Katherine Smith and Professor Samila Roslan for sharing such great insights.
Kok nggak
May
ada
each of us
Samila?
something from the lecture, and last but not least, I am Puan Audia Zahra, and on behalf of Ms. Kadek Suwardani and Yolanda, and all the team that who worked today, we thank you so much for your participation. If there are words that are less pleasing, we deeply apologize to you all. See you later and have a nice day. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
mo pancur sisa Melama ringismo bagai turang ale mardida kalakmo bekel masada Duan dando ale kadita po Duan dando ale kadita po
siga